2, 3, go. We are live!
That's a bunch of bullshit. You can't fucking tell me what to think.
Recording now.
Clap! That was my first motherfucking professional clap. You're better at it.
It should be just one snap, not a... I'm not good at that. So I just wanted to say I had a good time listening to Pearl Jam 10. Basically, I was in second grade when I first heard the song Jeremy. Either way, it was the first time I'd ever heard music where there was a mood that took me over. And it took me over like how MC Hammer took me over when I first heard that. I identified with it. I became a mark for Pearl Jam and for Eddie Vedder. You know, it was because of that power, that feeling mattering more than the words even. But when you saw that video and you realized that kid shot himself, like, I mean, I knew what that meant. I mean,
put it back how it was. You're gonna give people seizures.
That didn't look good at all. My bad. Didn't intend for it to be like that.
Nah, you're cool.
This one cycles through them at a mellow pace, like it's supposed to be.
But you know, as somebody who ends up being a musician, you were paying attention to music at a very young age anyway.
It hit me. I absorbed it. It was in the culture, so it was one of those cultural artifacts that was going to soak in whether I wanted it to or not. Because there were certain times where you'd hear a song for the first time based on it being on TV. For instance, when I was even younger, there was some tune by Heavy D that we saw on TV, and I was like, oh, we like this one. We saw it on a TV someplace. It must have been The Box. The other off-brand, the free, that are the ones that are just, you know.
What are your albums that are important to you?
Yeah, there are some albums that really influenced me a lot, like Abbey Road by the Beatles was a huge influence on me because it just had a different flair to it. Kind of like Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. That's one of my favorite albums that I like to take it as a one piece of artwork. That was how it was for me when I listened to The Carnival by Wyclef Jean. That was like my favorite album for a while, and I'd like to listen to the whole thing because it was telling a story.
Who were your heroes, like, when you started to want to write your own music?
Probably Eddie Vedder to a large extent. Because the first round of songs that I was writing, when you looked at the chords, I knew intuitively that Pearl Jam was probably my main influence when I was becoming a songwriter for the first few years from like age 13 to about 17. And then I mixed in other influence later. Started to sound kind of like Radiohead and Smashing Pumpkins and a little bit more like that, I guess, but he seemed to fly more free, and then you could see how that fed into a true wild man when he's climbing on the scaffolding and things like that, becoming a wild man that was living out an avatar of the people. He was going to become as wild as the people fed energy into him to become. He became willing to become as wild as they needed him to be. And because of everything that went on in my life, because I am a wild man, And I didn't have a diagnosis of it at the time. We just knew I was a wild man. The name of the kid in my neighborhood who I'm reminded of every time I hear that album, his name was Jason, the one that killed himself when he was in 7th grade, that lived across the street from us. You know, he was like, he treated me with a lot of kindness, even though he was an older kid. But he got in trouble. He thought his dad was gonna like ruin his life, and he didn't want to see that happen, or he wrote a suicide note, or I don't know. But yeah, that was the name of this kid. Memory I was seared into my subconscious. You know, because I was only in... It was the mid-90s. Like, this was happening all over the place. The kind of community I lived in was similar to Plano, Texas, which was notorious for suicide at the time. I lived in Plymouth.
Yeah.
And I knew, like, 4 different kids around my age that killed themselves, like, before I was, like, out of high school or whatever.
Yeah, it was an epidemic. It is an epidemic.
It's a real pandemic.
Yeah.
We knew we had a pandemic before this virus came around, and now we got 2.
Yeah.
And they still want to try and pretend we don't have a pandemic going on because the real pandemic is too hard to talk about.
They don't want to talk about the opioid crisis, and they don't want to talk about the suicide pandemic.
And they still let being bought off by a lot of alcohol companies and pharmaceuticals at the same time. Who knows what to trust them, the system. I don't trust it.
Have you struggled with addiction before?
I've gone to a 12-step meeting before. So yeah, I would say I have. The problem is I can't really figure out what to do because I have a sort of like I take the stance and the opinion that I'd prefer not to be like using cannabis for my therapy. But I can't find anything else that helps me get through the day because I have Tourette syndrome, so...
Moderate rock.